Hey there. Welcome back to Scary Times. The clock just struck midnight, and there's something unsettling about tonight's atmosphere. I've got some terrifying tales that'll make you question every shadow in your room. If you enjoy getting scared, with us, hit that subscribe button and join our haunted family. Now turn off your lights, put on your headphones, and let Scary Times guide you through tonight's collection of spine-chilling stories. The old tenement building loomed over me, its weathered facade a testament to the years it had stood in the heart of Hong Kong. I had grown up in this building, surrounded by the stories and whispers of neighbors. The narrow staircases, the creaky old elevator, and the rooftop were all familiar to me. Yet there was an air of mystery that lingered. One evening, after a long day at work, I found myself drawn to the rooftop. My friends had always warned me about going up there alone at night, sharing tales of spirits and strange occurrences. But curiosity got the better of me. I wanted to see the city lights from above, to escape the cramped confines of my apartment. As I climbed the stairs, the dim light flickered above me, casting long shadows along the walls. I could hear the faint sound of the old elevator creaking somewhere below, but I pressed on. When I finally reached the rooftop, I pushed open the door, and the cool night air hit me like a wave. The view was breathtaking. The city sprawled out beneath me, a sea of lights twinkling against the dark sky. I took a deep breath, feeling a sense of freedom. But as I turned to lean against the low wall, I noticed something strange. A small red envelope lying on the ground, partially hidden behind a stack of old bricks. I bent down to pick it up, feeling a thrill of excitement. Red envelopes were often associated with good luck, especially during the Lunar New Year. But as I held it in my hand, a chill ran down my spine. Something felt off. I glanced around, half expecting someone to appear, but the rooftop was empty. Ignoring my instincts, I opened the envelope. Inside was a note written in shaky handwriting. "Do not disturb the spirits. They are watching." My heart raced as I read the words. I had heard tales of people who had meddled with the spirits in this building and faced dire consequences. Suddenly, I heard a noise behind me. I turned quickly, but there was no one there. Just the soft rustle of the wind. I decided it was time to leave. As I made my way back to the door, I felt a presence behind me, an unsettling feeling that I was not alone. I hurried down the stairs, my heart pounding. I reached my apartment door and fumbled with the keys, desperate to get inside. Once I was in, I locked the door and leaned against it, trying to calm my racing heart. I couldn't shake the feeling that something was watching me. That night, I tried to sleep, but every creak of the building kept me on edge. I recalled the note in the red envelope, and I couldn't help but feel a sense of dread. Had I angered the spirits? I tossed and turned, finally drifting off into a restless sleep. In the middle of the night, I was jolted awake by a loud bang. I sat up in bed, heart racing. The sound had come from the hallway. I listened intently, straining to hear any other noises. Then I heard it, a soft whisper, like a breeze passing through the cracks of the old building. "Help us," I felt. A chill run down my spine. Was it my imagination? I got out of bed and crept toward the door, heart pounding in my chest. I opened it slowly, peering into the dark hallway. The flickering light cast eerie shadows, and I could see the old elevator door slightly ajar. Curiosity got the better of me again. I stepped out into the hallway, the floorboards creaking beneath my feet. I walked cautiously toward the elevator, the whispering growing louder with each step. "Help us." As I approached, the doors of the elevator suddenly closed. With a loud clang, I jumped back, my heart racing. I turned to run back to my apartment, but as I did, I saw a figure standing at the far end of the hallway. It was a woman, her hair long and disheveled, her white dress flowing around her like mist. She looked at me with hollow eyes, and I froze, in place. "Do not go up there," she whispered, her voice echoing in the hallway. "You must leave this place." I wanted to scream, to run, but my legs felt like lead. "Who are you?" I managed to stammer. "I am one of the lost," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "We are trapped here. You must not disturb the spirits." I felt tears welling up in my eyes. "What do you want from me?" I asked, my voice trembling. "Help us," she repeated. And then she vanished into thin air, leaving me standing alone in the dark hallway. I stumbled back into my apartment, slamming the door behind me. I locked it tight, my heart racing. I couldn't shake the image of the woman from my mind. I felt a deep sense of sadness for her, but I was terrified. I knew I had to leave the building, but I couldn't just abandon my home. The next day, I tried to act normal. I went to work, but my mind was elsewhere. I couldn't focus, haunted by the encounter. I spoke to my neighbor, an elderly woman who had lived in the building for decades. I hesitated before asking her about the stories of spirits. "Oh, there are many stories," she said, her eyes glinting with mischief. "This building has a history. People have seen things, heard things. You must be careful, dear. The spirits don't like to be disturbed." I swallowed hard, recalling the red envelope and the woman's warning. "What happens if you disturb them?" I asked. "They say bad things happen," she replied, her voice lowering. "People go missing or they become ill. It's best to stay away from the rooftop at night." That night I decided to confront my fears. I couldn't let the spirits control my life. I returned to the rooftop, determined to find answers. The air was thick with tension as I climbed the stairs, and I felt the weight of the building's history pressing down on me. When I reached the rooftop, I found the same red envelope lying on the ground. I picked it up again, heart racing. I opened it, but this time there was no note inside, just an empty envelope. My heart sank. Had I imagined the warning? Suddenly, I felt a cold breeze sweep across the rooftop, sending shivers down my spine. I turned to leave, but before I could, I heard the whispering again. "Help us." The wind picked up, swirling around me. I felt the presence of the spirits closing in, and I realized they were not angry. They were desperate. I closed my eyes, taking a deep breath. "What do you want?" I shouted into the darkness. "Help us." The voices echoed, more insistent now. I opened my eyes, feeling a surge of determination. "I will help you," I cried out. "Just tell me how." The wind howled around me, and I felt a sudden rush of energy. The shadows began to shift, forming the outline of the woman I had seen before. "You must find our resting place," she said, her voice clearer now. "Return to the spirits what belongs to them." I nodded, understanding dawning on me. I needed to find a way to honor the spirits, to give them peace. "Where do I find you?" I asked. "Follow the signs," she whispered, and then she vanished again, leaving me alone on the rooftop. I spent the next few days searching through old records and talking to neighbors. I learned about a forgotten cemetery nearby where many of the building's original residents were buried. It was a place that had long been neglected, overgrown with weeds and forgotten by time. That weekend, I gathered some flowers and incense, determined to pay my respects. As I approached the cemetery, I felt a sense of calm wash over me. The air was still, and the sunlight broke through the clouds, illuminating the worn gravestones. I knelt before the first grave, placing the flowers gently on the ground. "I honor you," I said softly. "I am sorry for any disrespect." I lit the incense and closed my eyes, feeling a connection to the spirits. As I moved from grave to grave, I felt a warmth enveloping me. It was as if the spirits were acknowledging my efforts. I finished my tribute at the last grave, and as I stood up, I felt lighter, as if a weight had been lifted from my shoulders. From that day on, the whispers faded, and the presence that had haunted me for so long disappeared. I could finally sleep peacefully, knowing I had honored the spirits of my building. The old tenement felt different now, filled with warmth and a sense of belonging. I still visit the rooftop occasionally, but now it feels like a place of peace rather than fear. I learned that honoring the past is essential, and sometimes the spirits just need a little help to find their way home. My name is Rio. I am a salaryman in Tokyo. Every day I ride the crowded trains to work and back home. Sometimes when I work overtime, I have to take the last train. People say the last train is dangerous, but I never believed in ghost stories. I thought they were just tales to scare children. One Friday night, I finished work very late. My boss asked me to stay and finish a report. By the time I left the office, it was almost midnight. I rushed to the station, my IC card in hand, hoping I wouldn't miss the last train. The station was almost empty. Only a few people waited on the platform, a tired student, a station worker cleaning the floor, and an old man sitting on a bench. The lights flickered and the air felt heavy. I checked the time, 5 minutes until the last train. I took out my phone and tried to take a picture of the empty platform. For a second, my phone screen showed something strange. A shadow standing at the end of the platform where no one was. I blinked and looked again, but the shadow was gone. I thought maybe I was just tired. The announcement came. The last train is arriving. I heard the train's sound echo through the tunnel. The train stopped and the doors opened with a soft chime. I got on and sat near the door. Inside, the carriage was almost empty. The student sat at the far end, the old man was gone, and the station worker didn't get on. The train started moving. The lights inside were dim and the windows reflected my tired face. I leaned my head against the glass and closed my eyes for a moment. Suddenly I heard a strange noise, like someone whispering. I opened my eyes but saw nothing unusual. The train passed through a tunnel, and for a moment, the lights went out. In the darkness, I heard the whisper again, closer this time. When the lights came back, I saw something on the seat across from me, a small old train ticket. I picked it up. It felt cold and the letters were faded. The ticket had no date, no station name, only the word return. I looked around. The student was gone. I didn't see him leave. The carriage was empty except for me. The train stopped at a small, unmanned station. The doors opened, but no one got on or off. I looked outside. The platform was dark, and I saw the shadow again, standing under a broken light. It didn't move. The train started again. I felt uneasy. I tried to use my phone, but it had no signal. The train speakers made a strange static sound, and then a voice spoke. "Next stop, Uri Station." I had never heard of such a station. The train slowed down and stopped. I looked outside. The sign said, Uri Station. The platform was covered in mist, and I saw many shadows moving slowly. They looked like people, but their faces were pale and empty. The doors opened. I felt a cold wind. Suddenly, someone sat down next to me. I turned and saw the student from earlier, but his eyes were dark and his skin was gray. He whispered, "Don't get off. If you do, you can never return." I froze. The shadows outside started to come closer. The train. Doors began to close, but one shadow slipped inside. It sat across from me and stared without eyes. The train started moving again. The student beside me disappeared. The shadow across from me faded away. I was alone again. The train's speakers crackled. "Next stop, your home station." The lights flickered, and I felt dizzy. When I opened my eyes, the train had arrived, at my usual station. The doors opened and I stumbled out. The platform was empty. Everything looked normal, but I felt cold and weak. I checked my pocket. The old ticket was gone, but my IC card was still there. I walked home, looking back at the station. For a moment I saw the shadow standing by the tracks, waving slowly. Since that night, I never take the last train. I never take photos at the station, and I never wait alone at night. Sometimes, when I hear the late-night announcement, I remember the ticket that said return and the pale faces at Uri Station. I hope I never see that train again. The city was quiet as I waited at the bus stop, the streetlights casting long shadows on the empty road. It was almost 2 in the morning, and the air was heavy with the scent of rain and exhaust. I had missed the last train home, and now the only way back to my small apartment in the New Territories was the all-night bus. My friends had warned me not to take the last bus, not after midnight, but I had no choice. I tapped my Octopus card nervously against my phone, watching the minutes tick by. The bus finally arrived, its headlights cutting through the fog. It was one of those old double-decker buses, paint peeling, windows fogged up from the humidity. The sign above the windshield flickered between numbers, but I recognized my route. I waved my hand, feeling a chill as the doors hissed open. The driver, an older man in a faded uniform, barely glanced at me as I climbed aboard. "Last bus," he muttered, his voice rough. I nodded and tapped my octopus card on the reader. The beep sounded strange, almost echoing too long in the empty bus. Only a few passengers were scattered throughout the lower deck, their faces hidden in shadow. I hesitated, remembering the warnings about sitting directly behind the driver, but all the other seats seemed taken or strangely uninviting. Against my better judgment, I sat down in the seat behind the driver and stared out the window. The bus pulled away from the curb, rumbling down the empty road. The city lights faded behind us as we entered a long, winding mountain road. The only sounds were the engine's low growl and the occasional beep from the stop announcement machine. I tried not to look at the other passengers, but I caught glimpses of their faces in the reflection of the window. They looked tired, pale, and somehow distant, as if they didn't quite belong to this world. We passed through a tunnel, the lights inside flickering. For a moment, the bus seemed to stretch on forever, the rows of seats repeating endlessly in the mirrors along the ceiling. I shivered and hugged my bag closer. My phone buzzed, but when I checked, there was no signal. The clock on the screen was stuck at 2:13. The bus stopped suddenly at a deserted stop on the hillside. A woman in a white dress got on, her face hidden by long, dark hair. She didn't tap her octopus card, just walked slowly down the aisle and sat at the very back. The driver didn't say anything. I watched her in the window's reflection, but she never moved. At the next stop, an old man boarded, clutching a battered briefcase. He sat near the middle, his eyes fixed on the floor. The bus felt colder, the windows fogging up even more. I wiped the glass with my sleeve and tried to see outside, but the world beyond was just blackness. I heard a soft voice behind me. "Is this the bus to the end?" I turned, but the seat was empty. My heart pounded in my chest. I tried to convince myself it was just my imagination, a trick of the late hour. The bus kept moving, winding deeper into the hills. The stop announcement machine crackled, but the voice was distorted, repeating the same stop over and over. "Next stop, next stop." I looked at the driver, but he stared straight ahead, his hands gripping the wheel tightly. I glanced at the other passengers. The old man was gone. His briefcase sat alone on the seat. I looked to the back, but the woman in white was still there, unmoving. I felt a sudden urge to get off, but the bus didn't stop. The road outside twisted and turned, but there were no lights, no other cars, nothing except our bus moving through the darkness. My phone buzzed again. This time there was a message from an unknown number. "Don't talk to strangers, don't sit behind the driver." My hands shook as I put the phone away. I tried to move to another seat, but my body felt heavy, stuck in place. The bus entered another tunnel. The lights flickered, and for a moment I saw the reflection of every seat filled with shadowy figures, all staring at me with hollow eyes. I shut my eyes and counted to 10, hoping it would all go away. When I opened my eyes, the bus was empty except for the driver and the woman in white. The briefcase was gone. The stop announcement machine clicked, but no words came out. I stood up, desperate to get off, but the bus didn't slow down. The driver finally spoke, his voice barely above a whisper. "Almost there." I looked at his face in the rearview mirror. His eyes were dark, empty, not quite human. I stumbled back to my seat, clutching my bag. The bus turned sharply onto a narrow, winding road. Outside, I saw the lights of a tunnel. Ahead, the woman in white stood up and began to walk slowly toward me. Her hair fell over her face and her hands were cold and pale. She stopped in front of me and whispered, "You shouldn't have sat here." I tried to speak, but no sound came out. She reached out and touched my arm. The world spun and I felt myself falling into the darkness. I woke up suddenly, gasping for air. The bus was at my stop, the doors open. The driver looked at me, his eyes normal again. "End of the line," he said. I stumbled off the bus, barely able to stand. The city was quiet, the streetlights flickering. I checked my phone. It was 3:07. I hurried home, locking the door behind me. I emptied my bag and found a battered bus ticket that wasn't mine, a faded number barely visible. I threw it away, but sometimes late at night, I hear the sound of the stop announcement, machine in my dreams repeating, "Next stop, next stop." Since that night, I never take the last bus. I always avoid sitting behind the driver. Sometimes, when I pass the bus stop late at night, I see a woman in white waiting, her face hidden by her hair. I never look at her and I never wave for the bus to stop. A few weeks later, I worked late again. The city felt different after midnight, quieter but somehow more alive with hidden things. I tried to call a taxi, but none came. The last train was long gone. My only choice was the night bus. I hesitated, but exhaustion won. I waited at the stop, clutching my octopus card, telling myself it would be different this time. When the bus arrived, it was a newer model, but the driver wore the same faded uniform. I avoided the seat behind him and sat near the middle, close to the door. The bus was almost empty. A young student sat by the window, headphones on, head down. At the back, a man in a cleaning uniform stared out at the dark street. The bus moved through the city, then up the winding mountain road. At each stop, no one got on or off. The stop announcement machine made strange, static-filled sounds. The bus entered a tunnel, and the lights flickered. I glanced at the reflection in the window. For a moment, I thought I saw the woman in white, sitting at the back, her head slowly turning toward me. I blinked, and she was gone. We came out of the tunnel, and the bus stopped. The student got off, leaving a notebook on the seat. I picked it up, intending to return it, but there was no name inside. Only pages filled with drawings of buses, tunnels, and a woman with long hair. My hands trembled. I left the notebook on the seat and moved closer to the front. The cleaning man stood up and walked to the door, but as the bus slowed, he disappeared. There was no one at the stop, only the empty road and the sound of wind. I looked at the driver, who met my eyes in the mirror. His gaze was cold and distant. "Almost. There," he said, just like before. I pressed the stop button, desperate to get off. The bus slowed and the doors opened. I stepped onto the silent street, my heart pounding. As the bus pulled away, I saw the woman in white standing at the back window watching me. I ran home, not daring to look back. That night, I dreamed of the bus again, the endless tunnels, the flickering lights, and the stop announcement machine repeating, "Next stop, next stop." Since then, I avoid the night bus whenever I can. But sometimes, when I have no choice, I keep my head down, never sit behind the driver, and never speak to strangers. I keep my octopus card close, and I never ever look at the back of the bus. Crowds gathered in the narrow streets, music and laughter filling the warm summer air. Lanterns hung from every stall, and the scent of grilled food drifted through the night. I had always loved the local summer festival, with its bright colors and happy faces. This was my first time back in my hometown in years, and I wanted to capture every moment with my camera. I wore a blue yukata and walked slowly through the festival, taking photos of the paper lanterns and the children playing with sparklers. The night was alive with the sound of drums and the cries of the vendors. I stopped at a mask stall and admired the rows of painted fox masks. The old man behind the stall smiled and told me each mask had a spirit inside. He warned me not to wear a mask unless I was part of the festival. I laughed and thanked him, but his words stayed in my mind. As I walked on, I saw the parade coming down the street. People carried a heavy makoshi, shouting and cheering. The crowd pressed close, and I snapped photos of the shining shrine, the sweat on the carriers' faces, the swirling festival fans. I felt a strange energy in the air, as if something ancient was watching. The parade passed, and the crowd moved on to the night market. I followed, drawn by the lights and the music. I stopped at a small shrine near the end of the street. Offerings of fruit and sake sat on a wooden table. A little fox mask rested beside the offerings. I raised my camera, but a sudden wind blew. out the lanterns around me. The street seemed darker and quieter. I heard the sound of laughter nearby, but when I turned, no one was there. I felt a chill and decided to move on. As I walked back toward the festival, I noticed a group of children playing near the shrine. One of them picked up the fox mask and put it on, dancing and laughing. The others cheered, but an old woman nearby scolded them, telling them not to play with the sacred mask. The child took it off and placed it back on the table. The old woman glanced at me and shook her head as if warning me too. The festival grew busier as the night went on. I tried different foods, bought a paper lantern, and watched fireworks light up the sky. But I could not stop thinking about the fox mask. Something about it felt important. I returned to the shrine, hoping to take one last photo. The offerings were still there, but the mask was gone. I looked around, but the street was empty. The music and laughter seemed far away. Suddenly, I heard footsteps behind me. I turned and saw a girl in a white yukata, her face hidden by a fox mask. She stood very still, watching me. I felt uneasy, but I raised my camera and asked if I could take her picture. She nodded slowly. I took the photo, and when I looked at the screen, her figure was blurry, almost transparent. The girl turned and walked away, disappearing into the darkness between the stalls. I followed, calling out, but she did not answer. The festival sounds faded, and the lanterns seemed dimmer. I found myself alone in a narrow alley, the air heavy and silent. I saw the girl ahead, standing by another small shrine. She placed the fox mask on the table and bowed deeply. I approached slowly, afraid to speak. The girl turned to me and whispered, "Do not wear the mask. It belongs to the spirits." Her voice was soft and distant, as if coming from far away. She walked past me, and as she did, I felt a cold breeze. I turned to watch her go, but she had vanished. I looked at the mask on the table. It was beautiful and strange, the eyes almost alive. I felt drawn to it, but I remembered the warnings. Still, my curiosity was strong. I reached out and touched the mask. It felt warm, almost pulsing. For a moment, I thought I heard distant music and laughter, but then everything went quiet. I quickly pulled my hand back and stepped away. I left the alley and hurried back to the main street. The festival was still going, but everything felt different. The colors were dull, the music softer. I tried to talk to people, but no one seemed to hear me. I waved my hand in front of a vendor, but he looked right through me. I checked my camera. The photos from earlier were gone. Only the picture of the masked girl remained, and in it, her eyes seemed to follow me. I felt a deep fear and ran back toward the shrine. The mask was gone, and the alley was empty. I wandered the festival, calling for help, but no one answered. I saw the old mask seller. I begged him to look at me, but he only stared past me, eyes blank. I realized I could not feel the ground under my feet. I tried to leave the festival, but every street led me back to the same alley. Finally, I saw the girl again. She stood by the shrine, mask in hand. She looked at me and said, "You broke the rule. You touched what was not yours." I tried to apologize, but my voice was just a whisper. She placed the mask on my face, and the world spun around me. I woke up to find myself standing in the alley wearing the fox mask. The festival was gone. The street was empty and silent. I tried to remove the mask, but it would not come off. My hands felt light, almost transparent. I heard distant music and laughter, but I could not move toward the sound. Now every summer, when the festival returns, I see the crowds from the shadows. I watch the children laugh and the lanterns glow. Sometimes, someone notices the mask resting on the shrine. I want to warn them, but I have no voice. I'm only a shadow waiting for the next person who forgets the rules of the festival. The old house creaked as I stepped inside, the familiar scent of dust and aged wood filling my nostrils. It had been years since I last visited my family's ancestral home, and the memories flooded back. My parents had always warned me about the family curse, a dark secret passed down through generations. They told me to respect our ancestors and never disturb anything in the house. especially at night. But curiosity had drawn me back, and I felt a strange pull toward the old family altar. As I walked through the dimly lit hallway, the wooden floorboards groaned under my weight. The walls were lined with faded photographs of my ancestors, their eyes seeming to follow me as I moved. I shivered, not just from the chill in the air, but from the weight of their gazes. I reached the room where the altar stood, a small space filled with incense, candles, and offerings. The altar had always felt sacred, a place of reverence and respect. I hesitated at the door, recalling my parents' warnings. Opening the altar at night was forbidden, but the allure of the unknown was too strong. I pushed the door open and stepped inside. The room was dim, illuminated only by the flickering candlelight. I could see the old wooden altar adorned with family heirlooms, prayer beads, a family tree, and photographs of those who had passed. My heart raced as I approached the altar. I reached out to touch the prayer beads, feeling the cool, smooth surface beneath my fingers. They felt strangely alive, as if they were pulsing with energy. I pulled my hand back, uncertain. The air grew heavy, and a sense of foreboding washed over me. Despite my instincts telling me to leave, I felt compelled to investigate further. I glanced around the room, my eyes landing on an old box tucked away in the corner. It was covered in dust, as if it hadn't been opened in years. I walked over and knelt beside it, my heart pounding in my chest. As I opened the box, a musty smell escaped, and I found old letters and photographs. They were remnants of my family's past, stories of love, loss, and sacrifice. I sifted through them, my fingers trembling with excitement and fear. One letter caught my attention. It was addressed to my great-grandmother. The handwriting was shaky, and the words were filled with desperation. It spoke of a curse, a warning to never disturb the family's resting place or the spirits would awaken. A chill ran down my spine as I read the letter. I had heard whispers of this curse, but seeing the words made it real. I quickly put the letter back in the box, my mind racing. I should leave, I thought. I should honor my family's wishes. But the pull of the altar was too strong. I turned back to the altar, the flickering candles casting eerie shadows on the walls. I caught a glimpse of my reflection in the glass of a framed photo. My face looked pale and drawn, and I felt a wave of unease wash over me. I took a deep breath, trying to calm myself. That's when I heard it. A soft whisper, barely audible, but it sent a jolt of fear through me. "Help us." The voice seemed to come from the altar itself. I froze, my heart racing. I wanted to run, but my feet felt rooted to the ground. "Who's there?" I called out, my voice shaking. The whispering grew louder, swirling around me like a cold wind. "Help us! Help us!" Panic surged through me, and I stumbled back, knocking over a candle. The flame flickered dangerously close to the altar, and I felt a surge of adrenaline. I had to get out of there. I turned to leave, but the door slammed shut, trapping me inside. "Let me out!" I screamed, pounding on the door. The whispers intensified, echoing in my ears. "You shouldn't have come here." I felt a presence behind me, cold and heavy. I turned slowly, and my breath caught in my throat. The shadows in the room twisted and formed a figure. A woman in a flowing white dress, her face obscured by long hair. She hovered just above the ground, her eyes glowing with a ghostly light. "Why have you disturbed us?" she asked, her voice a chilling whisper. "I didn't mean to. I just wanted to understand," I cried, backing away. The figure raised her hand, and I felt a wave of despair wash over me. I could see the pain in her eyes, a sorrow that transcended time. "You must leave this place," she said, her voice echoing like a distant memory. "The curse will consume you if you do not." I nodded, scrambling to find a way out. "I'm sorry, I'll leave," I pleaded. But the shadows closed in around me, and I felt the weight of despair pressing down. "Help us." The voices cried again, and I felt tears streaming down my face. I had to escape. I lunged at the door, throwing my weight against it, and miraculously it swung open. I stumbled out into the hallway, gasping for breath. I ran down the corridor, the whispers still echoing in my mind. I could feel the cold presence following me, urging me to stop. I burst into the living room, where the family portraits hung, on the walls. Their eyes seemed to watch me, judging me for my actions. I rushed to the front door, fumbling with the lock. It wouldn't budge. Panic surged through me again. I could hear the whispers growing louder, the shadows creeping closer. "You cannot escape," they taunted. Finally, the door clicked open and I flung it wide, stumbling out into the night. I gasped for air, the cool breeze hitting my face like a splash of cold water. I ran down the path, not looking back, the whispers fading behind me. As I reached the gate, I glanced back at the house. It loomed in the darkness, silent and foreboding. I felt a sense of relief wash over me, but it was short-lived. I remembered the letter and the warning. The curse was not just a story. It was real. Days passed, but the fear never left me. I tried to forget what happened, but the whispers haunted my dreams. I could still hear them calling for help, begging me to return. I knew I had to confront the curse, to break the cycle that had held my family captive for generations. One night, unable to sleep, I found myself standing in front of the family altar again, the candles flickering softly. I knew I had to face the spirits, to make amends for my trespass. I lit incense and knelt before the altar, my heart pounding in my chest. "I'm sorry," I whispered, tears streaming down my face. "I didn't mean to disturb you." The air grew heavy, and I felt a presence surround me. "You must break the curse," a voice echoed, deep and resonant. "Only then can we find peace." I nodded, determination filling me. "How?" I asked, my voice trembling. "Return to the family grave, honor your ancestors, and seek forgiveness," the voice instructed. With newfound resolve, I made my way to the family graveyard the next day. The sun was setting, casting long shadows over the tombstones. I knelt before my ancestors' graves, placing flowers and incense at each one. "I honor you," I said, my voice steady. "I ask for your forgiveness." The wind picked up, rustling, the leaves around me. I felt a warmth envelop me, a sense of peace settling in. I closed my eyes, feeling the weight of the curse lift. When I opened my eyes, the shadows that had haunted me were gone. I stood up feeling lighter, as if a great burden had been lifted. The whispers had faded, replaced by a soothing silence. I knew I had broken the curse, finally allowing my family to rest in peace. The first time I heard the story about the haunted mirror, I was sitting in my grandmother's old house, the rain tapping softly against the shoji screens. My grandmother always warned me not to look into mirrors at midnight, but I never understood why. Her vanity table stood in the corner of her tatami room, an antique with a large oval mirror and tiny drawers filled with combs and hairpins. Sometimes when I visited her, I would sneak a peek at my reflection, wondering what secrets the mirror might hold. One summer, I stayed at her house while my parents traveled for work. The days were long and quiet, and I spent most of my time reading or helping with chores. At night, the house creaked and groaned, and shadows moved across the paper walls. I couldn't sleep well, so I often wandered the halls or sat by the window, watching the rain. One night, I woke up thirsty and went to the kitchen for water. On my way back, I passed my grandmother's room and saw the door slightly open. The lamp inside was still on, casting a warm glow over the vanity. I glanced at the mirror and thought about the stories she told me. I checked the clock on the UA wall. It was almost midnight. I stood in the doorway staring at my reflection. The room behind me looked normal, but something about the mirror felt strange. My heart beat faster as I remembered my grandmother's warning. I told myself it was just a superstition, but curiosity pulled me closer. I stepped inside and sat down in front of the vanity. The mirror was cold to the touch. I looked at my own face, searching for anything unusual. For a moment, nothing happened. Then, I noticed a thin red line running along the edge of the glass, like a crack or a thread. I reached out to touch it, but my finger met only smooth glass. I leaned closer, trying to see if it was a scratch, but the line seemed to move, curling around the edge of my reflection. Suddenly, I heard a soft whisper, almost too quiet to understand. I froze, listening. The voice sounded like my own, but softer, echoing from somewhere far away. "Don't look," it said. "Don't speak." My breath caught in my throat. I wanted to run, but I couldn't move. The room grew colder, and the shadows in the corners grew darker. My reflection began to change. The eyes in the mirror widened and the mouth twisted into a strange smile. I tried to look away, but my eyes were locked on the glass. The red line now wrapped around my reflection's neck like a ribbon. I remembered the stories about mirrors being gateways for spirits. My grandmother once said that if you spoke to your reflection at midnight, something from the other side might answer. I pressed my lips together, afraid to make a sound. The whisper grew louder, repeating the same words. "Don't look. Don't speak." My hands trembled as I reached for the small comb on the vanity. I gripped it tightly, hoping it would protect me somehow. The comb was old, with a red thread tied around the handle. I remembered my grandmother tying it there, saying it would keep bad spirits away. My reflection reached out, its hand pressing against the inside of the glass. I watched in horror as the fingers left faint marks like frost on a window. The red line pulsed, growing brighter. I squeezed my eyes shut, trying to block out the image. When I opened my eyes, the room was silent. The reflection was gone, replaced by the ordinary sight of my own face. I let out a shaky breath and stood up quickly, knocking over the comb. It rolled under the vanity, out of reach. I didn't dare look for it. I left the room and closed the door behind me, heart pounding. The next morning, my grandmother noticed the comb was missing. She asked if I had touched the mirror, her eyes sharp and worried. I lied and said I hadn't. She nodded slowly and told me to stay away from the vanity at night. After that night, strange things began to happen. Sometimes when I walked past a mirror, I saw a flash of red in the corner of my eye. My reflection would lag behind, moving just a second too slow. Once, in the bathroom at school, I washed my hands and looked up to see my reflection smiling, even though my own face was blank. I ran out, heart racing. One afternoon, I visited a department store with my friends. We took the elevator to the top floor, laughing and chatting. The elevator had mirrors on all sides, making it feel like we were surrounded by endless copies of ourselves. As the doors closed, I glanced at my reflection. In the mirrored wall behind me, I saw the red line again, curling around my neck. I tried to ignore it, but I felt a cold hand brush against my shoulder. I turned, but no one was there. My friends didn't notice anything strange. When the elevator doors opened, I rushed out, trying to shake off the feeling. That night, I dreamed of the mirror. In the dream, I sat at the vanity, brushing my hair. My reflection watched me with empty eyes, the red line glowing brighter and brighter. It whispered, "Come closer. Speak to me." I woke up sweating. The image burned into my mind. I decided to return the comb to my grandmother's room, hoping it would stop the strange events. I waited until daytime when the house felt safe. I crawled under the vanity and found the comb, the red thread still tied tightly around it. As I stood up, I glanced at the mirror. For a moment, I saw another face staring back at me, pale and thin, with dark hair falling over its eyes. I blinked, and it was gone. I placed the comb on the vanity and whispered, "I'm sorry." I backed out of the room, closing the door gently. That night I slept with the lights on, afraid to look at any mirrors. After that, the strange thing stopped. My reflection returned to normal, and the flashes of red disappeared. My grandmother never asked about the comb again, but she seemed relieved. Before I left her house, she gave me a small hand mirror with a crack running through it and a red thread tied around the handle. "Keep this with you," she said, "and remember, never look into a mirror at midnight." Now, whenever I see a mirror, I remember that summer. I never speak to my reflection, and I always look away when the clock strikes 12. Some stories are more than just superstition, and some warnings are meant to be followed. A few years passed, and I moved to the city for university. My new apartment was small, but it had a large bathroom mirror above the sink. I tried not to think about the past, but sometimes late at night, I caught myself glancing at my reflection, searching for any sign of the red line or the strange smile. One evening, after a long day of classes, I received a message from an old friend. She asked if I remembered the ghost stories we used to tell each other in school. We decided to meet at a cafe near campus and talk about old times. As we laughed about our childhood fears, she mentioned a rumor about the school bathroom mirror. "They say if you talk to your reflection at midnight, it will answer you back," she said, lowering her voice. "But you have to use a red comb." Heart skipped a beat. I asked her if anyone had tried it. She shrugged. "Some people say they heard whispers. Others saw a red line appear on their necks the next morning." I forced a laugh, but the memory of my grandmother's mirror and the red thread returned. That night, I couldn't sleep. The city was noisy, but my room felt too quiet. I stared at the bathroom door, the mirror inside hidden in the darkness. I remembered my grandmother's cracked hand mirror, still wrapped in a red thread, sitting in my drawer. I got up and took it out, holding it tightly. I sat on my bed, watching the clock. As midnight approached, I felt a strange pull toward the bathroom. I tried to resist, but my curiosity was stronger. I walked slowly to the door and turned on the light. The mirror above the sink reflected my tired face. I stood there, clutching the cracked hand mirror, my heart pounding. I remembered the rules. Never look into a mirror at midnight, never speak to your reflection, never use a red comb. I set the hand mirror on the counter and stared at my reflection. For a moment, nothing happened. Then I saw a faint red line appear at the edge of the glass, curling slowly toward my image. A cold wind brushed past me, and the lights flickered. I heard a whisper, soft and familiar. "Come closer," it said. My reflection's eyes grew darker and its mouth twisted into a cruel smile. I wanted to run, but my legs would not move. Suddenly, the cracked hand mirror fell to the floor, landing with a sharp sound. The red thread unraveled and slid across the tiles. My reflection reached out, its hand pressing against the inside of the glass. I closed my eyes and whispered, "Go away." The room grew colder and the whisper faded. When I opened my eyes, the red line had disappeared, and my reflection looked normal again. I picked up the cracked mirror and wrapped the red thread around it, my hands shaking. After that night, I covered the bathroom mirror with a towel before going to bed. I kept my grandmother's hand mirror close, the red thread tied tightly around the handle. Whenever I felt the urge to look into a mirror, at midnight I remembered the voice, the cold wind, and the warning that some rules should never be broken. The train ride to the countryside was long and quiet. I watched the green hills pass by, thinking about my last few months at work. I needed a break, so I booked a room at a small hot spring inn far from the city. The website showed peaceful gardens and old wooden buildings. I wanted to forget my worries, even just for a few days. When I arrived, the inn looked exactly like the photos. A narrow path led to a wooden gate, and beyond it was a small courtyard with a pond and some maple trees. The air smelled of pine and earth. The owner, a kind old woman in a simple kimono, greeted me with a gentle smile. She showed me to my room, sliding the paper door open with a soft sound. Inside, tatami mats covered the floor, and a futon was set up in the corner. A small table held a pot of tea and a pair of wooden sandals. The owner explained the rules. No bathing in the hot spring after midnight, no knocking on other guests' doors at night, and never enter another guest's room without permission. I nodded, thinking the rules were just for peace and quiet. After unpacking, I walked around the inn. The halls were lined with paper lanterns, and the garden was filled with the sound of running water. I saw a few other guests in yukata, quietly talking or looking at the koi in the pond. I felt calm for the first time in weeks. Dinner was served in my room. The food was simple but delicious. After eating, I decided to try the hot spring. The bath was outside, surrounded by rocks and bamboo. Steam rose from the water, and the only sound was the wind in the trees. I relaxed in the warm water, letting my thoughts drift away. When I returned to my room, I dried off with the soft towel and fell asleep almost immediately. Sometime in the night, I woke up. The room was dark, but I heard footsteps in the hallway. They were slow and heavy, stopping outside my door. I held my breath, waiting. After a moment, the footsteps moved on. I tried to tell myself it was just another guest, maybe going to the bathroom, but I could not sleep for a long time. The next morning, I asked the owner if there had been other guests in my hallway at night. She shook her head and said all the rooms in my section were empty. I laughed it off, not wanting to seem nervous. I spent the day exploring the village, visiting a small shrine and buying snacks from a local shop. When I returned, the inn felt quiet, almost too quiet. At dinner, the owner told me there would be a festival in the village the next night, and many guests would arrive soon. That evening, I sat in the garden, watching the lanterns glow. I heard laughter from another room and saw a young couple walking to the bath in matching yukata. I decided to try the hot spring again before bed. The bath was empty, and the water felt hotter than before. As I soaked, I saw a pale shape move behind the bamboo fence. I called out, but no one answered. I quickly finished and returned to my room. That night, I woke again to the sound of footsteps. This time, they stopped at my door and then moved to the next room. I heard a soft knock, then silence. I waited, listening, but nothing else happened. I checked the time. It was past midnight. I remembered the rule about not knocking on doors at night and felt uneasy. I tried to sleep, but my dreams were filled with strange images. Dark hallways, sliding doors that would not open, and a pale figure standing at the end of the corridor. The next morning, I saw the owner in the garden. I told her about the footsteps and the knocking. Her face grew serious. She said quietly that many years ago a guest had broken the rules and entered another's room at night. After that, strange things began to happen. Some guests heard knocking or saw shadows in the halls. She told me not to worry, but to follow the rules carefully. That day, more guests arrived for the festival. The inn was lively, with people laughing and music in the distance. I tried to enjoy myself, but I kept thinking about the footsteps. That evening after the festival, I returned to the inn. The halls were full of voices, and I felt safer. I went to the bath early, then returned to my room and locked the door. Late that night, I woke to the sound of rain. I listened, but soon realized it was not rain. It was footsteps, slow and heavy, moving down the hallway. They stopped outside my door. I sat up, heart pounding. Suddenly, there was a soft knock. I did not answer. The knocking came again, louder. I remembered the rules and stayed silent. The knocking moved to the next room, then the next, growing fainter each time. The next morning, I heard that a guest had left in the middle of the night, saying they felt watched. The owner looked tired but said nothing. I thought about leaving, but curiosity kept me there. That evening, I sat in the garden watching the lanterns. I saw a woman in a white yukata standing by the pond. She did not move or speak. When I looked again, she was gone. That night, I prepared for bed, making sure the door was locked. I lay awake, listening. Around midnight, I heard footsteps again. This time, they stopped for a long time outside my door. I heard a soft voice, almost a whisper, asking to be let in. I pulled the covers over my head and stayed silent. The voice grew sad, then faded away. In the morning, I found a wet towel outside my door. It was not mine. I asked the owner about it, but she only said to leave it in the bathhouse. That day, I felt uneasy. Every time I passed a sliding door, I thought I saw someone watching me from the other side. I spent most of the day outside, walking in the hills and avoiding the inn. On my last night, I packed my things early. I went to the bath one last time, then returned to my room. I lay awake, waiting. Just after midnight, the footsteps returned. They stopped at my door. There was no knocking this time, only silence. I waited, barely breathing. After a long while, the footsteps moved away, and I heard a door slide open somewhere down the hall. The next morning, I left the inn early, The owner thanked me for staying and gave me a small key as a gift. She told me it was for good luck and to remember the rules of the inn. As I walked to the station, I looked back at the inn. In one of the windows, I saw a pale face watching me, then disappearing as quickly as it had appeared. Now back in the city, I sometimes dream of the inn. I hear footsteps in the hallway, soft knocking at my door, and a voice asking to be let in. I keep the key on my desk, a reminder of the rules and the quiet warning of that peaceful, haunted place. The neon lights flickered outside my apartment window, casting strange shadows on the walls. It was late, and the city felt alive with a pulse of its own. Yet I felt an unsettling quietness within my small room. I had just finished a long day at work, and I was exhausted. The thought of taking the last train home filled me with dread, but I had no other choice. As I stepped out of my apartment, I felt a chill in the air. The streets were mostly empty, except for a few late-night convenience, store workers and the occasional person waiting for a bus. I pulled my coat tighter around me and made my way to the train station. The sound of my footsteps echoed in the silence, and I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being watched. When I arrived at the station, the platform was dimly lit, and a few other passengers waited for the last train. I could see the flickering lights of the vending machines nearby, their bright colors contrasting with the dark surroundings. I took out my IC card and prepared to tap it on the reader, but my hand trembled slightly. The last train pulled into the station, and I stepped inside, grateful to find a seat by the window. I watched as the city blurred by, the neon lights creating a surreal landscape. A few other passengers sat quietly, lost in their own thoughts. I tried to relax, but something felt off. The atmosphere was thick, and I felt a sense of unease creeping. And as the train moved along the tracks, I noticed a woman sitting across from me. She was staring blankly at the floor, her long hair hiding her face. I glanced away, not wanting to make eye contact. My mind wandered to the urban legends I had heard about late-night trains, stories of people disappearing, of strange occurrences that left passengers terrified. Suddenly, the lights flickered, and the train came to an abrupt stop. I felt a jolt of panic. The overhead announcements were silent, and the usual hum of the train was gone. I looked around. The other passengers seemed just as confused as I felt. The woman across from me had lifted her head, and I could see her face now. Her eyes were wide and hollow, as if she had seen something unimaginable. "Is this a joke?" I muttered under my breath, feeling a knot tighten in my stomach. The train lights flickered again, and I could hear a faint whispering sound. It was like a chorus of voices, murmuring just beyond my understanding. I looked around, but no one else seemed to notice. I felt a chill run down my spine. I wanted to get off this train. I glanced at my phone, hoping for some distraction, but there was no signal. I was cut off from the world. The whispers grew louder, and I could make out fragments of words, but they didn't make sense. "Help us. Find us." I turned to the woman, who was now staring directly at me. "Do you hear them?" she asked, her voice low and trembling. "Hear what?" I replied, trying to keep my voice steady. "The voices," she said, her eyes darting around as if she were searching for something. "They're here with us." I felt a wave of nausea wash over me. "You're scaring me," I admitted, looking away. I wanted to ignore her, to pretend we were just two strangers on a late train, but her intensity made it impossible. Just then, the train jolted again, and the lights flickered out completely. I gasped, my heart racing. In the darkness, I could hear the whispers more clearly now, echoing in my mind. "Help us. Help us." I felt the air grow colder, and I instinctively pulled my knees to my chest. I wanted to scream, but no sound came out. The darkness felt alive, wrapping around me like a suffocating blanket. Then the lights flickered back on, and I saw the woman again. She was closer now, her face twisted in fear. "They're coming," she whispered, her voice barely audible. "Who?" I managed to ask, my voice shaking. "The ones who ride the train with us," she said, glancing nervously over her shoulder. They want to take us. I felt a surge of panic. This isn't real. It can't be happening. I looked around the train, desperate for someone to reassure me, but the other passengers were gone. The car felt empty, except for the two of us. "Please, we have to get off," I said, my voice rising in desperation. "We need to get out of here." The woman shook her head. "It's too late. They've already chosen." I was about to protest when the train lurched forward and the lights flickered again. This time they didn't come back on. I was plunged into darkness once more, and I heard the whispers growing louder, more insistent. "Help us. Help us." Suddenly, I felt a cold hand grip my shoulder. I froze, unable to move. The hand was ice cold, sending shivers through my body. I turned slowly, terrified of what I might see. In the darkness, I could make out a figure standing next to me. It was a man, his face pale and gaunt, eyes hollow like the woman's. "You shouldn't have come here," he whispered, his breath cold against my skin. I stumbled back, trying to escape, but the darkness closed in around me. I felt trapped, suffocated by the whispers and the shadows. "Let me out," I screamed, but my voice was swallowed by the void. Just then, the lights flickered back on, and I saw the train was moving again. The man was gone, but the woman was still there, her eyes wide with terror. "They're angry," she said, her voice trembling. "We have to get off." I nodded, feeling a surge of adrenaline. I had to escape this nightmare. I looked at the door, but it wouldn't open. I pounded on the glass, desperate to get out. "Somebody help us!" I shouted, but my voice echoed back at me, empty and alone. The train began to slow down, and I could see the lights of the next station ahead. "We're almost there," I cried, hope flickering in my chest. But the woman was shaking her head again. "It's not safe. They'll follow us." Before I could respond, the train lurched to a stop and the lights flickered out once more. I felt a wave of despair wash over me. "Please no," I cried, feeling the darkness close in again. When the lights finally returned, the woman was gone. Panic surged through me as I looked around. I was alone in the car, the silence deafening. I pressed my face against the glass, desperate to see if anyone was outside. The station was empty, the platform dark and deserted. I felt my heart race as I reached for my phone again, but it was still dead. I was trapped. I took a deep breath and tried to calm myself. I had to find a way out. I stood up, ready to push the door open, but as I did, I saw something in the reflection of the glass. Behind me, the shadows shifted, and I could see the outlines of figures. They were watching me, their eyes glowing faintly in the dark. I felt a scream rising in my throat, but forced myself to stay calm. I had to get out. The train doors opened with a hiss, and I rushed out onto the platform. I stumbled forward, my heart pounding in my chest. The station was eerily quiet, and I could feel the presence of something behind me. I turned to look, but there was nothing there. Just darkness. I ran toward the exit, my footsteps echoing in the empty station. As I reached the door, I glanced back one last time. In the shadows, I saw the woman standing there, her face twisted in terror. "Help us," she mouthed silently. I pushed through the door and into the night, gasping for breath. The cool air hit me, grounding me in reality. I turned to look back at the station, but it was just a building now, quiet and still. I felt a shiver run down my spine, knowing I had escaped something terrible. But as I walked away, I couldn't shake the feeling that they were still with me, lingering in the shadows of my mind. I pulled out my phone, desperate to call someone, anyone. But when I looked at the screen, I saw something chilling. A message had appeared, a text that I hadn't sent. "Help us." I froze, my heart racing as I realized the truth. They were still there, waiting for the next unsuspecting passenger to take the last train. My name is Yuki. I am a university student living alone in Tokyo. My life is busy, classes in the day, a part-time job at a convenience store at night. Sometimes, I finish work so late that I have to take the last train home. People always say, There are many urban legends in Tokyo, but I never believed them. Until one night changed everything. It was almost midnight. The convenience store was empty except for me and my manager. I was sweeping the floor when I heard a strange sound like static from an old radio. I looked up, but the manager didn't seem to notice. I finished cleaning, changed my clothes, and waved goodbye. The street outside was quiet. Neon lights from the vending machines blinked in the dark. I checked my phone. The last train would leave in 10 minutes. I hurried to the station, my IC card ready in my hand. The station was almost empty. Only a few people waited on the platform. A tired salaryman, a high school girl, and an old woman with a cane. I glanced at the security camera above the ticket gate. For a moment I thought I saw another face in the monitor. A pale face with dark eyes staring straight at me. I blinked, and it was gone. The train arrived. I got in and sat by the window. The doors closed with a soft beep. The train started, moving. The lights inside flickered, making shadows dance on the floor. I felt a chill, but told myself it was just because I was tired. The train stopped at the next station. The old woman got off. The salaryman and the high school girl moved to another car. Now, I was alone. I looked at my phone, trying to distract myself. Suddenly, the screen went black, even though I had just charged it. I looked up. Across from me sat a young woman. She wore a white dress and held a small notebook in her hands. I didn't see her get on the train. She was writing something, her long hair hiding her face. I felt uneasy, but tried to ignore her. The train rattled through the city. I glanced at the woman. She looked up, and I saw her eyes, dark, empty, and cold. She smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. She tore a page from her notebook and held it out to me. I hesitated, but took the note. It said, in shaky handwriting, "Call this number at 2:44 a.m. Don't look at the cameras." I looked up to ask her what it meant, but she was gone. The seat was empty. I looked around, but there was no sign of her. My heart pounded in my chest. The train stopped at my station. I got off quickly, my hands shaking. The platform was empty. I hurried home, trying not to think about the note. But curiosity burned inside me. What would happen if I called the number? At home, I put the note on my desk and tried to sleep. But I kept waking up, thinking about the woman on the train. At 2:30 a.m., I gave up and sat at my desk, staring at the note. At 2:44 a.m., I picked up my phone and dialed the number. The phone rang once, twice, 3 times. On the 4th ring, someone answered. I heard whispering, like many voices speaking at once. Then a single voice said, "Why did you call?" The line went dead. Suddenly, my phone rang. The caller ID was blank. I answered, my voice shaking. The same voice whispered, "Don't look at the cameras." Then the call ended. I felt cold all over. I looked at my window, at the dark city outside. I noticed a red, blinking light from the security camera in my apartment building's hallway. For some reason, I felt drawn to it. I stepped outside my room and walked down the empty hallway. The camera above the elevator blinked. I tried not to look, but curiosity got the better of me. I glanced at the monitor near the elevator. At first, I saw only myself standing in the hallway. Then behind me, another figure appeared, a woman in a white dress, her hair covering her face. She stood very close behind me. I spun around, but no one was there. I ran back into my apartment and locked the door. My phone buzzed. A new message. "You broke the rule." I stared at the screen, my hands shaking. Suddenly, the lights in my apartment flickered and went out. I heard footsteps outside my door, slow, soft, getting closer. I hid under my desk, holding my phone. The footsteps stopped outside my door. I heard a whisper right by my ear. "Don't look at the cameras." The next morning, I woke up on the floor. My phone was gone. The note was gone. Everything felt like a bad dream, but the fear was real. At work, I asked my manager if anything strange had happened last night. He shook his head. But when I checked the convenience store's security camera footage, I saw something that made My blood froze. At midnight, the camera showed me leaving the store. Then, for a moment, a woman in a white dress appeared behind me. She stared at the camera, her eyes dark and empty. I never took the last train again. I never called strange numbers, and I never looked at the cameras late at night. Sometimes I see notes on the train, or my phone rings at 2:44 a.m. I never answer. I know she's still out there, waiting for someone to break the rule. Rain fell softly on the city streets as I hurried home from work, my shoes splashing through shallow puddles. The neon lights of convenience stores and vending machines glowed in the darkness, and the sound of passing trains echoed between the tall apartment buildings. I was tired after a long day at the office, and all I wanted was to get home and rest. My apartment was small but comfortable, just a short walk from the station. I glanced at my phone to check the time. It was already close to midnight. I reached the station just as the last train pulled in. The platform was almost empty, only a few people standing near the doors. I tapped my IC card on the gate and stepped inside. The train was quiet, the lights bright but cold. I found a seat near the window and put my bag on my lap. As the train started to move, I looked around. There was a man in a suit sleeping with his head against the window, a high school girl listening to music, and an old woman holding a shopping bag. The rest of the seats were empty. The train moved through the city, stopping at each station for only a moment. Outside, the buildings passed by in a blur of light and shadow. I leaned my head against the window and closed my eyes, but I could not relax. I remembered a story I read online about the last train. People said that if you rode the last train alone, you might see things that were not there, or meet people who were not really alive. I told myself it was just a story, but I could not shake the feeling of unease. At the next stop, the old woman got off, leaving her shopping bag behind. I called out to her, but she did not turn around. The doors closed and the train moved on. I looked at the bag. It was old and dirty, with a strange symbol drawn on the side. I thought about picking it up, but something about it made me uncomfortable. I left it where it was. The train grew quieter as we went deeper into the city. The man in the suit woke up, checked his phone, and got off at the next stop. The high school girl was still there, but now she was staring at her phone with a worried look. I noticed she was typing a message, her fingers moving quickly. Suddenly, she stood up and walked to the door, glancing back at me with wide eyes before stepping off the train. Now I was alone. The train did not stop at the next station. It just kept moving, the lights inside flickering. I checked my phone, but there was no signal. I tried to look out the window, but all I could see was darkness. I felt a chill run down my spine. I heard a sound behind me, like someone whispering. I turned around, but the seats were empty except for the old shopping bag. The symbol on it seemed to glow faintly in the dim light. I looked away, trying to calm myself. It was just my imagination, I thought. Suddenly, my phone vibrated. I looked at the screen. There was a new message from an unknown number. It said, "Do not look at the cameras." I frowned, confused. I had not touched the train's security cameras. I looked up and saw a small camera in the corner of the car, its red light blinking. I felt drawn to it, but I remembered the warning. The train slowed down and stopped in the middle of a tunnel. The lights went out for a moment, and I was left in total darkness. I could hear my own breathing, fast and shallow. When the lights came back on, I saw a piece of paper on the seat across from me. I picked it up. It was a note, written in shaky handwriting. "If you see her, do not speak. If you hear her, do not answer. If you feel her, do not move." A cold wind blew through the car, even though the windows were closed. I shivered and looked around. The shopping bag was gone. In its place was a small cassette tape. I had not seen anyone come in or out. I picked up the tape, turning it over, in my hands. There was no label, just a black surface with a single scratch. The train started moving again, slowly at first, then faster. The lights flickered and the camera's red light blinked faster. I tried to ignore it, but I felt like someone was watching me. My phone vibrated again, another message. "Do not get off until you reach the end." I tried to send a message to my friend, but the screen stayed blank. No matter what I did, I could not get a signal. I looked at the tape, wondering if I should listen to it. I remembered the stories about cursed tapes, about people who listened and never returned home. I put the tape in my pocket and tried to focus on the sound of the train. At the next station, the doors opened, but the platform was empty. The lights were off and the sign was broken. I stayed in my seat, remembering the warning. The doors closed, and the train moved on. I heard footsteps in the next car. They were slow and heavy, echoing through the empty train. I held my breath as the footsteps came closer. A woman appeared in the doorway. Her hair was long and covered her face. She wore an old white dress, dirty and torn at the bottom. She stood there, not moving, her head tilted to one side. I remembered the note. Do not speak, do not answer, do not move. The woman stepped into the car and sat down across from me. I kept my eyes on the floor, trying not to look at her. She began to hum a strange song, soft and sad. The sound made my skin crawl. She leaned forward and whispered my name. I did not know how she knew it. My heart pounded in my chest. She whispered again, her voice colder this time. Look at me, she said. I clenched my fists and stared at the floor. I wanted to run, but my body would not move. The lights flickered again and the train shook. The woman stood up and walked toward me. I felt her cold hand touch my shoulder. I closed my eyes, trying to block everything out. The train seemed to go on forever, never stopping, never slowing down. Finally, the train came to a stop. The lights came back on, brighter than before. I opened my eyes. The woman was gone. The car was empty. I looked out the window and saw the familiar station near my apartment. I grabbed my bag and ran off the train, my legs shaking. I hurried home, looking over my shoulder the whole way. When I got inside, I locked the door and sat on my bed, trying to calm down. My phone buzzed again. A new message. You made it. Do not ride the last train again. I took the cassette tape out of my pocket and looked at it. I wanted to throw it away, but something stopped me. I put it in a drawer and tried to forget about it. But that night I dreamed of the woman on the train. She stood at the end of my bed, her hair covering her face, humming that same sad song. The next day I went to work as usual. Everything felt normal, but I could not stop thinking about the train, the messages, and the woman. I decided to take the bus home that night, just to be safe. A week passed. One night, I was walking home from the convenience store when I saw a payphone at the corner of the street. It was old and covered in dust. As I passed by, the phone started to ring. I stopped, my heart beating fast. I remembered the stories about strange phone calls, about people who answered and disappeared. I walked away quickly, not looking back. At home, I found a note slipped under my door. It was written in the same shaky handwriting as the one on the train. Do not answer the phone. Do not look at the cameras. Do not ride the last train. I threw the note away, but I could not stop thinking about it. That night, I checked the security camera in the hallway outside my apartment. For a moment, I saw a shadow standing near my door, long hair covering its face. When I blinked, it was gone. From then on, I avoided the last train, strange phone calls, and the security cameras in my building. Sometimes, late at night, I heard the sound of humming in the hallway, soft and sad. I locked my door and tried to sleep, hoping the woman from the train would not find me again. A thick fog covered the empty streets as I walked with my friends toward the old hospital at the edge of town. We had heard stories about the place since we were children, stories that grew darker every year. People said the hospital was cursed, that shadows moved behind broken windows, and that no one who entered after midnight came out the same. My friend Kenji loved urban legends. He always looked for new places to explore and record for his channel. He brought his camera, a flashlight, and an old map he had found online. Yuki, the quietest in our group, wore a mask and carried a small notebook. She said she wanted to write about real haunted places. I only came along because I did not want them to go alone. The hospital was a tall, gray building with shattered windows and doors hanging off their frames. We squeezed through a hole in the fence and walked up the cracked steps. The air inside was cold and smelled like mold and rust. Our flashlights made long shadows on the peeling walls. Kenji began filming, right away, talking into his camera about the hospital's history and the strange things that had happened there. He said a fire had closed the hospital years ago, and some patients were never found. Some people believed their spirits still wandered the halls. We moved slowly, our footsteps echoing on the dirty tiles. Old beds and broken chairs blocked the hallways. Sometimes we found faded photos, empty medicine bottles, or torn curtains. Kenji showed everything to his camera, whispering about curses and lost souls. Yuki wrote down every detail, her eyes wide behind her mask. I tried to stay close to them, but the darkness made it easy to feel alone. As we climbed the stairs to the second floor, I noticed strange marks on the walls. They looked like handprints, but they were too high and too thin. I pointed them out, but Kenji just laughed and said it was probably a prank. Yuki took a picture with her phone. We passed a row of patient rooms. Some doors were open, others closed tight. In one room, we found a pile of old toys and a small broken doll. Yuki stared at it for a long time before writing something in her notebook. We reached the operating room where the ceiling had collapsed in one corner. Kenji filmed the rusty tools and the broken lights. Suddenly, our flashlights flickered. The air felt colder and I heard a soft sound like someone breathing nearby. Kenji whispered for us to be quiet. We listened, but the sound stopped. Yuki's phone buzzed with a new message, but when she checked, there was nothing there. Kenji wanted to go to the basement. The stairs were narrow and covered in dust. I did not want to go, but I followed them down. The basement was darker than the rest of the hospital. Our flashlights barely lit the way. Old machines and boxes filled the rooms. Kenji found a door at the end of a hallway and pushed it open. Inside, the walls were covered with old photographs. Some showed doctors and nurses. Others showed patients who looked very sick. In the center of the room was a small table with a cracked mirror and a faded photo. Kenji picked up the photo and turned it over. There was a name written on the back, but it was hard to read. He put the photo in his pocket, even though we all knew the rule: never take anything from a place like this. Yuki looked nervous. She said we should leave, but Kenji wanted to film more. He walked deeper into the basement, talking to his camera about the photo he had found. The flashlight beams danced on the walls, and I thought I saw something move in the corner of my eye. I called out to Kenji, but he did not answer. Suddenly, the door slammed shut behind us. The sound echoed through the basement. We tried to open it, but it would not move. The air grew colder, and I heard footsteps in the dark. Yuki gripped my arm tightly. Kenji tried to force the door, but it stayed closed. The lights flickered again, and I saw a shadow move across the wall. It looked like a person, but it was too thin and too tall. Yuki whispered that we should not have come here at night, that we should not have touched anything. Kenji finally stopped filming. His hands shook as he held the camera. We heard a voice from the other side of the room. It sounded like a child crying. Yuki started to cry too, her notebook falling to the floor. Kenji turned his flashlight toward the sound, but there was nothing there. The crying grew louder, mixed with whispers. The photos on the walls seemed to move in the flickering light. I felt something cold touch my shoulder. Kenji dropped the photo he had taken. The crying stopped. The door creaked open by itself. We ran out of the basement, up the stairs, and through the empty halls. The hospital seemed to twist around us, every hallway looking the same. My heart pounded as we searched for the exit. Yuki tripped and fell, dropping her notebook. Kenji grabbed her hand and we pulled her up. We finally found the hole in the fence and ran outside. The fog was thicker now, and the street lights looked far away. We did not speak as we hurried home. That night, I dreamed of the hospital. I saw the crying child, her face hidden by shadows. She held out the photo Kenji had tried to take, her eyes empty and sad. The next day, Kenji called me. He said his camera would not turn on, and the photo from the hospital was missing. Yuki said her notebook was gone too. We met at a cafe and talked about what happened. None of us wanted to go back to the hospital, but Kenji said he felt like someone was watching him. Yuki said she heard crying at night and saw handprints on her window in the morning. A week passed, but the strange things did not stop. Kenji's computer crashed every time he tried to edit his video. Yuki's phone filled with blurry photos she did not remember taking. I found an old photo in my backpack, one I had never seen before. It showed the three of us standing in the hospital basement, but there was a fourth figure behind us, tall and thin with empty eyes. We decided to return to the hospital to put things back. We waited until sunrise. The hospital looked different in the light, less threatening but still sad. We went to the basement and left the photo on the table. Yuki placed a new notebook beside the old one she had dropped. Kenji apologized out loud, bowing deeply. For a moment, the air felt lighter. As we left, I glanced back and saw the crying child standing in the hallway. She watched us go, her face still hidden. We never spoke of that night again. Kenji stopped making videos about haunted places. Yuki wrote stories about the living, not the dead. I avoided old buildings and never explored another ruin. Sometimes when fog covers the streets, I remember the hospital and the rules we broke. I think about the photo with the extra figure and wonder if something followed us home. I keep my flashlight and a mask near my bed just in case the shadows return. Red lanterns glowed softly at the entrance of the old shrine, their light barely reaching the stone path leading through the Torii Gate. I was a student staying in a small Japanese village for the summer, helping with some research about local legends. The villagers often talked about the shrine at the edge of the forest, warning everyone not to visit at night. They said spirits watched over the place, and breaking the rules would bring disaster. I listened politely, but I did not really believe in such things. Curiosity grew inside me every day as I passed the shrine on my way to the market. The path was lined with mossy stone lanterns and 2 stone guardian dogs, their faces worn by rain and time. The shrine looked peaceful during the day, but at night it seemed to disappear into the darkness. One evening, after a long day of writing notes in the library, I realized I had left my notebook near the shrine. It was already dark, but I needed it for my work. The village was quiet, with only the sound of cicadas and the distant splash of water from the shrine's washing basin. I hesitated at the entrance, remembering the warnings, but I stepped through the Torii Gate anyway. The air felt colder inside, and the trees seemed to close in around me. My footsteps echoed strangely on the stone path. I found my notebook near the purification basin where people washed their hands before praying. As I picked it up, I heard a soft jingling sound. It came from a small bell hanging near the offering box. I looked around and saw no one. The shrine building stood silent. In the shadows, its wooden doors closed. I tried to leave quickly, but something caught my eye. On a rack beside the shrine, dozens of wooden ima plaques hung from red strings. People wrote their wishes on them and left them at the shrine. One plaque had fallen to the ground. Without thinking, I picked it up. The writing was faded, but I could still read the words, "Please let me see my daughter again." I placed it back on the rack, but as I did, I felt a cold breeze brush past me. I hurried down the path, but the way out seemed longer than before. The stone lanterns flickered and the shadows grew deeper. I heard a soft voice behind me whispering words I could not understand. I tried not to look back. When I reached the Torii Gate, I glanced over my shoulder. A woman in a white kimono stood by the shrine, her long black hair hiding her face. She did not move. I ran out of the gate and back to the village, my heart pounding. That night I could not sleep. My dreams were filled with the sound of bells and the image of the woman at the shrine. The next morning, I woke up feeling tired and uneasy. I decided not to tell anyone what happened. But when I went to the market, the villagers stared at me and whispered, An old woman stopped me and asked if I had been to the shrine after dark. I lied and said no. She pressed a small omamori charm into my hand and told me to keep it with me at all times. For days I avoided the shrine, but strange things began to happen. I heard the sound of bells outside my window at night. My notebook, which I had left on my desk, moved to the floor by itself. Sometimes, when I walked past the shrine during the day, I saw footprints in the gravel even though no one else was there. One evening, I found a white paper streamer tied to my door, the kind used in shrine rituals. I tried to ignore it, but fear grew inside me. One night, I woke up to the sound of footsteps outside my room. I looked out the window and saw the same woman in white standing under the streetlight. Her head bowed. I closed the curtains and tried to calm myself, but the sound of bells grew louder. I remembered the old woman's words and held the omamori tightly in my hand. The next morning, I found a message written on my notebook. Return what you have taken. My hands shook as I read the words. I realized I must have broken a taboo at the shrine. I did not steal anything, but maybe touching the Ima plaque was enough. I decided to visit the shrine and try to make things right. I waited until sunrise and walked to the shrine with the omamori in my pocket. The air was heavy and still. The stone guardian dog seemed to watch me as I passed. I bowed at the entrance and walked to the rack of Ima plaques. I found the one I had touched and placed a new plaque beside it, writing a wish for forgiveness and peace. I rang the bell, clapped my hands, and bowed deeply. As I turned to leave, I saw the woman in white, standing by the purification basin. This time her face was visible. She looked sad, not angry. She nodded once and disappeared into the morning mist. The air felt lighter, and the shadows faded. After that day, the strange events stopped. The bells no longer rang at night, and my notebook stayed where I left it. The villagers smiled at me again, and the old woman told me I had been forgiven. I never visited the shrine at night again. When I left the village at the end of summer, I placed the omamori on the shrine's offering box and thanked the spirits for their mercy. Mist hung low over the narrow mountain road as I walked, the sky turning dark much faster than I expected. My backpack felt heavier with each step, and the only sound was the crunch of gravel under my shoes. I was traveling alone, hoping to find a quiet place away from the city. I heard about a small hot spring inn deep in the mountains of Japan, where the air was clean and the nights were peaceful. My friend told me it was a special place, but I should never enter the forest after dark, and always follow the village rules. The air grew colder as I climbed higher. Bamboo trees lined both sides of the path, their thin trunks swaying in the wind. I passed a small stone shrine with a paper lantern hanging from a branch. Someone had left rice and fruit as an offering. I stopped for a moment, feeling the quiet all around me. I took a photo, but the image on my phone looked strange, as if a shadow was hiding behind the shrine. I shrugged it off and kept walking. Soon, the path opened to a small village surrounded by fields. The houses were old and wooden with tiled roofs and sliding doors. I saw a few villagers working in the fields, wearing straw hats and grass sandals. They looked up as I passed, their eyes following me, but no one smiled or waved. I felt a little uneasy but tried to ignore it. I reached the inn just as the sun disappeared behind the mountains. The owner, an old woman in a kimono, greeted me at the door. She bowed deeply and handed me a small charm, a protective amulet. "Please keep this with you," she said quietly, "and do not go into the mountains at night. It is dangerous." I nodded, thanked her, and promised to be careful. The inn was simple but comfortable. My room had a tatami floor, a futon, and a window looking out onto the dark forest. After a hot bath, I joined the other guests for dinner. Everyone was quiet, eating slowly. I tried to start a conversation, but the old woman shook her head. "We do not speak much after sunset," she said. "It is better to let the spirits rest." After dinner, I went back to my room and listened to the sounds of the night. The wind rustled through the bamboo, and sometimes I heard distant footsteps outside. I told myself it was just animals or villagers returning home. I lay down, holding the amulet tightly, and tried to sleep. A strange sound woke me in the middle of the night. It was a soft tapping at the window. I sat up, heart pounding. The room was dark except for the faint light of the paper lantern outside. I got up and slid open the window a little. The cold air rushed in, and I saw a white fox mask lying on the ground below. I looked around but saw no one. I closed the window and tried to calm myself. Curiosity got the better of me. I put on my jacket, slipped the amulet into my pocket, and quietly left the room. The hallway was empty. I tiptoed to the entrance and stepped outside. The village was silent, the only light coming from a few lanterns. I walked toward the edge of the bamboo forest, drawn by the sound of music drifting through the trees. I knew I should not go into the forest at night, but something pulled me forward. I followed a narrow path, the bamboo closing in around me. The music grew louder, mixed with laughter and voices. I saw paper lanterns hanging from the branches, lighting the way deeper into the woods. Suddenly, I stumbled into a small clearing. In the center, a group of people in old clothes danced around a fire. Some wore fox masks. Others had strange wooden clogs on their feet. They moved in circles, chanting and singing. I watched, frozen, as one of them turned and looked straight at me. The mask was white with red markings, and the eyes behind it glowed in the firelight. I tried to back away, but my foot caught on a root and I fell. The dancers stopped and turned toward me. The one in the fox mask stepped closer, holding out a hand. "You are not from here," a voice whispered. "Why do you break the rules?" I tried to speak, but my mouth was dry. "I'm sorry," I said. "I didn't mean to disturb you. I was just curious." The masked figure shook its head. "Curiosity is dangerous here. You have entered sacred ground at the wrong time." The others began to whisper, their voices rising and falling like the wind. I remembered the amulet in my pocket and held it up. The fox-masked person paused, staring at the charm. "You were given protection," the voice said, "but protection has limits." The fire flickered and the shadows grew longer. The dancers began to move again, circling me this time. I felt dizzy, the world spinning around me. I closed my eyes and clutched the amulet, praying for help. When I opened my eyes, I was lying on the ground at the edge of the village, the sun just rising. My clothes were damp with dew and the amulet was still in my hand. The village looked peaceful, as if nothing had happened. I stood up, my legs shaking, and walked slowly back to the inn. The old woman met me at the door. She looked at me with sad eyes and took the amulet from my hand. "You are lucky," she said softly. "The mountain spirits let you go this time, but do not break the rules again. Not everyone returns." I packed my things and left the village that morning. As I walked down the mountain road, I saw the old shrine again. The offerings were gone, and the paper lantern was missing. I felt a chill as I remembered the shadows in the forest and the eyes behind the fox mask. Now, whenever I hear the wind in the bamboo or see a paper lantern at night, I remember that night in the mountain village. I never forget the warning. Some rules are there for a reason, and some places are not meant for outsiders after dark.